Rewrite each polynomial in standard form, then name it by number of terms and degree. So first we're going to look at these and we're going to put them in standard form. And to put them in standard form, what you want to do is you want to look for the exponent on the variable. Now here the variable is x. There's no exponent there. So if I want to, I can think about there being an implied 1. So this is x to the first. Here we have x to the third. And what you want to look for is the biggest exponent. So here the biggest exponent is x to the third. So I'm going to imagine taking all of that, including that plus sign out front. And if I'm going to write this in standard form, I want the term with the biggest exponent to come first. So I would say this is x cubed. Once I move it up front, we don't need the plus anymore. Then I look for the next largest exponent, which in this case is going to be the 1. So I take it and the sign that's in front of it and rewrite this so that it looks like that. So in standard form, this is x cubed minus 5x. Now I'm supposed to name this by number of terms and degree. So let's start with degree. Notice how when I put this in standard form, I looked for the exponents and I put the exponents in there, starting with the biggest and then going down. If I want to name this thing by degree, what I do is I look for that biggest exponent. So here the biggest exponent is 3, and then there's a list of names that I just have to have memorized that tell me how to name it based on that. So here's this list. We're naming it by degree. Our largest degree was degree 3, which means this is a cubic function. So coming back to this, we would say that this function is cubic because its degree, the largest exponent, is 3. Now we need to name it by the number of terms. So the number of terms, you'll notice how I boxed these things out, and I included the sign and the expression that contained the variable. The number of things that you are adding together, the number of things in these boxes as I've drawn them here, is the number of terms. So you can see this one has 2 terms, 2 things being added or subtracted together. And so if I look, based off of the number of terms, this thing should be called a binomial. So for number 1, we would say that number 1 is a cubic binomial. And now we've written it in standard form and we've named it. Let's do the same thing for number 2. We look for the biggest exponent, which in this case is going to be a 4. And so when we write this in standard form, that's the term that will come first. So in standard form, this would be 3x to the 4th. Now we look for the next biggest exponent, which would be 3 minus 8x cubed. The next biggest would be 2 minus 8x squared. Now, once we get down to these, it gets a little bit tricky. Here we have our variable with no exponent, so we can assume a 1. So that's our next biggest. And then for this term right here, it doesn't have a variable at all. So that means it has, you can think of it as an x raised to the 0 power. And so that would come at the very last place. So there it is in standard form. Let me scoot it over so you can actually see the end of that. Now we need to name it by degree. This is a 4th degree polynomial. So the name for that, we would call this a quartic function. Be sure not to get quartic and quadratic confused. A lot of people see quadratic and see that quad and think 4. But a 4th degree is called a quartic. So this would be a quartic, and then we need to count the number of terms, how many things that are being added together. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And notice we've run out of things here. So what we do is past 3 terms, these don't really have names, So 4 would be a 4-term polynomial. If it has 5 terms, it's a 5-term polynomial. So on this one, we don't have a special name for it. So we would say this is a quartic 5-term polynomial. And now we have written it in standard form. We have named it by terms and degree, and we are finished.